WALL-E uses a bleak future in which Earth has become inhospitable as a backdrop to an adorable love story. This shouldn't work, but the filmmakers make it look easy. We're talking about how it does that this week in Kaden's Movie Club. There's a running joke about Pixar movies that the entire formula is what if blank had feelings? What if toys had feelings? What if bugs had feelings? What if monsters had feelings? What if fish had feelings? And what if cars had feelings? And now we get what if robots had feelings? Oh, and also, what if human complacency gets so bad that a single corporation takes over every facet of our lives and renders us completely inept, leading to the desolation of our planet? Both of these questions are not only present in WALL-E, but walk side by side to tell a unified, heartfelt story. It doesn't seem like such a blatant social commentary and such whimsy should be able to mesh. How does this work? Of course, there's a lot of technical skill at play here. It's well written, well directed, the sound design goes a long way, but the story is only possible because of the magic of animation. Last month we looked at artificial intelligence as our theme, and the question in a lot of those movies we watched was centered around whether or not it was actually possible for machines to gain sentience. But here, that's not a question at all. WALL-E clearly has an identity all his own, and the movie makes this immediately clear with zero dialogue. The miracle of WALL-E is that human artists are able to convince the audience in a matter of minutes that this robot is basically a person. They have an incredible ability to understand not just what human emotion looks like, but what it feels like. And then they translate that onto something inanimate through their artwork in such an effective way that we as the audience don't even question it. The irony is that while human artists can make us believe a robot has feelings, generative AI will never be able to create something of genuine emotion. It might be able to regurgitate what people have done before, but it won't be able to create anything truly new. And more importantly, it will never understand the why of what it's doing, which renders the result completely devoid of what makes it resonant in the first place. Now obviously I'm not a fan of generative AI, especially when it comes to art, but does that really tie into WALL-E? Absolutely, stick with me. The Earth has been abandoned by humanity. It seems devoid of natural life, with the exception of an indestructible cockroach. Even the machinery left behind is all but dead. The only one still kicking is a single WALL-E unit, which stands for Waste Allocation Load Lifter Earth Class. WALL-E is a glorified garbage bin. We assume humans designed the WALL-E robots before they left Earth, and the funniest part about this design is that for all of WALL-E's capabilities, he's not actually solving the problem in any way. He doesn't get rid of all the waste. His entire purpose is to pick up the trash and move it somewhere else.
We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else!
The human race got to the point where they had consumed so much, where a corporation had produced so much waste, that the world was simply not livable anymore. So they all hop on a massive spaceship that's designed like a luxury cruise and take off to space. They're only supposed to be there for 5 years, and then they'll come back to Earth once these robots have cleaned everything up. Obviously that didn't go so well since nearly all of the robots are no longer functioning, and the trash piles have simply replaced skyscrapers. Everything in this story speaks to that idea of society's complacency, and on the spaceship, things have only gotten worse over the last 700 years. Every possible thing about people's lives has been automated, right down to walking. They don't have to lift a finger. But these people don't even notice what's obvious to us. Replacing things just because they take some effort doesn't always yield a positive result. Everyone is given constant distractions so that they fall into that complacency. The ship is basically one huge shopping mall, which is absurd itself, but most people don't even see that because there's a screen right in front of their face at all times. Meanwhile, WALL-E, a machine, is journeying across the galaxy in pursuit of love. He's enamored with Eve, and her whole purpose is to bring a plant back to the humans as a sign that they can return home. WALL-E follows Eve onto the ship and is clearly more human than the humans aboard the ship.
One wasn't so superficial, you know?
But people
There are good men out there. Well, I know because I've screwed a bit up. What the?
This movie is able to walk the tightrope where the danger of technology is addressed without completely villainizing it. Of course, advancing technology can do incredible things. WALL-E and Eve, our protagonists, are examples of that. The real danger is how we implement that technology. And if the goal is only ever to remove difficult processes from our lives, even if those processes are important for us to experience, then we'll end up in a place devoid of real living. And hopefully you can see where I'm getting at with AI. It's the same lesson to be learned. AI may very well be able to do some incredible things in the future, but
your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Human greed is currently what's driving companies to consider replacing artists with AI, but greed won't be the thing that actually causes it to happen. It will be complacency from the rest of us. The corporation in the movie, by and large, wouldn't exist if people didn't buy what they're selling. At some point, we'll face a choice, or more likely a series of choices. One road will keep our humanity intact, the other will result in living aboard the Axiom. Now I do want to acknowledge that there was at least one evil robot in the movie, Otto. However, I think this character only reinforces the themes we've been discussing here. First, his name is literally Otto, as in A-U-T-O. He's the exact opposite of Wall-E. He lacks any kind of real identity beyond the goal of his programming. He talks, but in this extremely robotic, distorted voice.
Not necessary, Captain. You may give it to me.
Even Wall-E's little beeps feel more emotional than his words. And some of you might already know, he's clearly inspired by another infamous robot, HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey. I was this close to putting this movie in the lineup for AI, but I figured there was so much going on in that movie, we'd save it for another time. Just know, this was entirely deliberate. I don't think the future shown in Wall-E is the most literal or realistic depiction of a post-apocalypse, but thematically, it's as relevant as ever. And that's the reason why I think it works so well in our theme this month. Movies that occur after society's downfall usually do so to critique society's current issues. So what do you think? Is there something in our current society that would cause us to end up in a future like the one in Wall-E? But before we wrap up, I'd like to give a sneak peek at next week's movie, Train to Busan. Now we're cheating a little bit here because this movie is not technically post-apocalyptic. We're witnessing the beginning of a zombie apocalypse, but from a very specific perspective. A bunch of strangers forced to endure it together while on a commuter train. Zombie movies are a whole genre on their own, but I also wanted there to be at least one through and through zombie movie in our post-apocalyptic theme because they kind of go hand in hand. And with Train to Busan, the zombies are about as classic as you can get. We watched I Am Legend, and I had a whole thing about how those creatures are actually more like vampires and they're intelligent. Not here. These are zombies, baby. And truth be told, how you feel about zombies is going to be the biggest determining factor on whether or not you enjoy this movie. The story does have some social critique that we'll discuss, but it's also more of a popcorn movie than what we've watched before. It can be melodramatic and campy, but that is a lot of the fun of it. And I thought if we were going to do a straight up zombie movie, it would be cool to watch an international movie. And this is a South Korean film. Now I'm generalizing here, but in the US, people don't often get exposed to cinema from other countries unless they choose to seek it out themselves. I mean, I personally know a few people that refuse to watch movies with subtitles. You know who you are. But if you're in a movie club, there's a pretty solid chance you've watched plenty of international films, but if not, this will be a great opportunity to broaden those horizons a bit. Something I always like to remember with movies from other countries is that there are probably some pretty specific cultural references or analogies that apply specifically to that place where the movie comes from. So with the zombie genre, there are a lot of tropes that we're aware of. For example, in almost every zombie movie, it feels like someone has to make a choice about whether to save themselves or help a person being swarmed by zombies, right? So with Train to Busan, we get to see some of those tropes applied in a way that acts as a social commentary for a culture we may not be familiar with. And I think it's really interesting to learn about other cultures through the stories they tell. So here's some questions to keep in mind while you watch. What do you think the movie was trying to say about society as a whole? Do you think any of that social commentary is specifically relevant to Korean audiences at the time? Or is it pretty universal? Near the midpoint, characters are forced into certain groups. Do you think there's any thematic significance to who is in what group? Why? As always with Kaden's Movie Club, we like to discuss the movies we watch like a book club, so let's chat in the comments about Wall-E, and I'll see you back here next week for Train to Busan. And if you want to officially join Kaden's Movie Club, you know where to go.